Hi, I'm Justin with All Wheel Drive Auto, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about brake calipers as it pertains to your Subaru. First off, I kind of want to say that it's generally unlikely that you should ever need to have to replace the calipers on your Subaru. There's a local chain of tire stores that claims the right way to do brakes to your Subaru is to replace the calipers every time, and I kind of want to get into that a little bit, so let's just kind of start there. Basically, this is a caliper installed by the same tire chain. They claim the right way to do brakes is to replace the calipers every time. So what they do is they take out a good quality original equipment component comprised of great quality pistons and seals, and replace it with something that resembles this right here, which is a component that's been sandblasted and then nothing done to it to keep it from rusting. So what it does is it rusts. This component is a year old. It was installed a year ago by a franchise tire store. And what happened is that this particular component froze. As a result, you can see the discoloration that happened to the brake pads, but the other thing that I'd like to point out is you can actually see just how thick the brake pads still are. Long before these brake pads wore out, this particular component let the customer down to the point where the vehicle actually had to be towed in. So let's kind of talk about the differences between this component and that component and how this turned into this. Both components went through some sort of a cleaning process as part of the remanufacturing process. This component, actually you can see all of the pitting that is inside of the internal parts of the caliper pistons. Now, in all honesty, without taking this particular component apart, I don't know whether or not there's any of that same exact pitting on the other side of the caliper piston, but I'm going to tell you that most likely there is. That's just something that we have seen plenty of. And there's an inner seal inside of this caliper bore, and the piston moves inside of that seal as the brake fluid is displaced. If there's any pitting, that's going to affect the performance of the piston moving in and out of the seal in a very negative way. You can see over here, these pistons were actually replaced. Rather than just bead blasted and reused, these caliper pistons were actually replaced. That's actually a new component that went into a housing. And then that housing, as part of the process, it was actually had some preventative measures applied to it. You know, it's a type of paint that was put on to help prevent the caliper from turning into this. And why that's important is that pitting is really bad for brakes. It's bad for anything that moves. Let's get into the caliper slide pins for a minute. This is a caliper slide pin, and what's supposed to happen is that as you depress the brakes, the caliper slide pins move, and basically this is what should happen. The caliper piston, or the caliper slide pin rather, should move in and out with braking action. Press and release, press and release. That's what the way that system should work. Press and release. Let's come over here to this particular brake caliper, and I'm going to push this, and nothing happens. Push it, nothing happens. Push it, nothing happens. I actually have to physically lift up on that pin, and you can actually see what happens to the dust boot at that point in time to push it. And once I push it, nothing happens. Come back over to this one, push it. That's the way that should work. You can see there's a big disparity between quality of these particular components. So know that when you're calling around to get a price on brakes, in the event that you actually do need calipers, how do you know as a customer what's being used? Those are the questions that you have to ask. What's the country of origin of the remanufactured component? I'm not going to say which country these came from, but I venture that most likely they were probably a product of Mexico or China. Those are the two popular remanufacturing centers right now for a lot of the brake components installed by this particular tire chain. Again, what happened here is this is a brake component that let the customer down to the point where they basically had to pay to have their brakes done. Because this was actually the second time that they were done by this particular tire chain, and they were just done. So they had to pay a little more to have something like this put on, but I have absolute confidence that it's not going to have any more problems. And I kind of want to revisit the right way to do brakes on a Subaru is to replace the pads, to service the caliper slide pins to make sure that they move like this, to replace the brake hardware, which are these pieces right there, and to resurface or replace their disc brake rotors as needed. Under normal circumstances, there's really no reason to replace this particular component. The ones that came from Subaru are good quality. It's not Subaru's recommendation to replace the caliper every time the brakes are replaced. The brake caliper should be replaced only in the situations where they've had some sort of a problem. East Coast cars, maybe a little more often than West Coast cars. Roads aren't treated on the West Coast nearly like the roads you're treated in the Midwest and the East Coast. It's just a different set of weather circumstances. So again, to kind of review, this is a component that really shouldn't belong on your car, because it's going to end up looking like this, and it's going to end up letting you down. In the event that you have to have your brake calipers replaced, this is what you want to have installed on your car. But again, I want to stress, most likely under just the normal brake replacement procedure, you should not have to have the brake calipers replaced. That would be an unusual situation. Don't be fooled by a shop that wants to do it their way. Do it the right way. Justin, All Wheel Drive Auto, trying to keep you informed.